Coming up, Southeast Kansas health officials say the numbers show vaccinations work. Why it's the lack of those vaccinations that's delaying an end to the pandemic. And local school districts consider how they're going to respond to CDC guidance for students returning to the classroom. Also, how Joplin businesses are pushing for a more inclusive community.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
Good morning and welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 5 a.m. I'm Zach Dodge. We had a pretty nice day yesterday.
Yeah, wasn't too bad at all.
Might see some changes going on later in the week though.
A little bit hotter.
Yeah?
A little bit hotter today, and then we can talk about thunderstorms.
Okay.
First, let's get through the heat. Look at this, Zach.
Right.
We're already sitting at 76 degrees over 7th and Range Line. This point in time yesterday, it was low 60s. Now, no, we've only got 169 still out there. That's in Cassville. Everybody else already pushing up in the low to mid 70s. So the 24-hour temperature change, yeah, we're talking easy double-digit increase from yesterday. Skywatch Storm Tracker with a little bit of cloud cover up to the north. But when we look at the Midwest, really the thunderstorm activity stays far to the north up through portions of South Dakota and Nebraska. Here for our weather trend, we're talking about 91, 92 later on today, feeling about like 96, 97. That's because the humidity is upon us and it is here to stay. Now, staying on the dry side for today, it'll be tomorrow when the thunderstorm activity kicks in, and not only thunderstorms rolling through there Thursday night into Friday morning, but the heat doesn't want to go anywhere. We'll roll back-to-back 91s here for the middle of the week and then finish off the work week and head into the weekend still in the high 80s.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll check back in with you in just a little bit.
And I shall be here for you, Mr. Don.
All right. Crawford County Health Department and Ascension Via Christi Hospital officials held a press conference at Pitt State. Officials say the county is seeing its 4th major spike in COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. The vast majority of those new cases, along with every recent death, are people who have not been vaccinated. Health officials reiterated that the vaccines are safe and recommended.
If we are going to see breakthrough cases where someone's fully vaccinated and still gets COVID, that is not a vaccine failure. If they stay out of the hospital, that's a vaccine success story. And so I think that's what we need to reiterate to people.
And to provide
Just under 50% of the county's population has received at least one dose of a vaccine. Area schools are facing some tough decisions about how to respond to CDC guidance for students returning to the classroom. KOAM's Bronte Srotsky spoke with the Carthage School District to find out their approach.
Available for anyone 12 and over, the CDC is relaxing its COVID-19 guidelines. Recently, the Public Health Agency announced that fully vaccinated students and teachers can return to the classroom this fall, mask-free. For those unvaccinated,
well, I think CDC and local health departments recommend that the unvaccinated students and teachers continue to wear a mask.
Local school districts like Carthage schools are using this new guidance to promote health in their community.
We will promote vaccinations. We'll tell our staff, our students, our parents, community members, if you are vaccinated, you will not be quarantined, and that's the bottom line.
As for how things will be different in the fall,
they do not have to wear their mask if they're vaccinated, and they will not be quarantined if they're vaccinated.
For unvaccinated students, the district won't require masks, but if they don't wear a mask and come into contact with someone testing positive, they will be quarantined. Should case numbers increase, this plan could change.
Now, if something changes in our society, in our local area, that all of a sudden a variant or another variant is spreading to where kids are positive, our staff positive, we might have to make some changes to our plan.
Which is why the district plans to work closely with the health department to stay on top of cases.
Really what matters the most for us is what's happening in our community.
If we have quarantined people out in the county, then we quarantine them and provide information to the schools about who we have under quarantine or isolation at a given time.
It's still a bit early to know exactly how different schools will operate by August, but Carthage Schools says they plan on following the numbers. In Carthage, Bronte Srotsky, KOAM News.
Carthage students will return to school on August 23rd. A new hardware store and jobs are coming to Frontenac, Kansas. The Harbor Freight Tools chain says it expects to open a store at 1007 North Highway 69 late this summer, but has not given an official date. Construction is underway, though. The company says the store will bring 25 to 30 new jobs. Harbor Freight currently has more than 1,200 stores nationwide. A number of Joplin area businesses say they're committed to creating a more diverse, welcoming, and inclusive community, and they were recognized at a news conference on Tuesday. The Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce and its Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Work Group formally introduced the launch of their Joplin Leadership Pledge. Dozens of companies and groups have already signed the pledge. The EDI group says the goal is to ensure that companies and individuals create cultures that welcome and support everyone.
These individuals work in our businesses, and right now talent attraction is a challenge for many businesses in our community. We want to make sure we have a community where everyone feels like they belong.
To learn more or to sign the pledge, visit choosejoplin.com/pledge. Young LEGO fans have a chance to get their creations put on display in Fort Scott, Kansas. The Museum of Creativity is testing out a LEGO club. Kids ages 10 to 18 are able to participate and build according to a theme. The top 3 builds from each week's session will be displayed in the museum.
I'm learning from them too. Like they do something and I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. And I mean, that happens when I'm teaching crafts too. Like someone will do it a certain way and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So I'm learning too, you know, I learn from them. We all think differently and we all create, you know, a society where we can help each other and learn and grow.
The museum is using this session as a test to gauge community interest in the LEGO Club. Springfield, Missouri is canceling this year's Birthplace of Route 66 festival due to COVID-19 concerns. The August event had looked like it would happen, but a surge of the Delta variant has made the area a national hotspot for new cases. Organizers say they don't want the festival to spread the coronavirus even more and strain the hospital systems. The city is also canceling its Ozark Empire Fair this month. This is the second year the Route 66 festival has been canceled. It's 5:07.
Off to a warm Wednesday start as we're already sitting in the 70s and continue to climb with mostly sunny skies and highs around 91 degrees. Also, watch out for the south wind. It's coming in pretty good right now and later on gusting about 20 to 25 miles per hour. Overnight, wind's going to stick around and we are going to be warm. No way to put it when you're talking about overnight lows that are still in the 70s. Now, as we push into Thursday, we've got enough Gulf moisture that those clouds are going to be ready to pop, and that's what they will do beginning Thursday afternoon and carry us into Friday morning. But we'll still stay on the warm side with temperatures in the high 80s all the way through the weekend.
That's a look at this morning's top stories and weather in our first 7 minutes. Coming up on the KOAM Morning News, finding help.
A life and death battle with depression. I'm Elise Preston with a very personal story from inside our own CBS family.
Plus, we hear from a former Pittsburgh standout and his unique basketball journey. And we take a look at a new poll that finds using cash helps Americans budget money better. You're watching the KOAM Morning News. More real news in the morning. We'll be right back.
Joplin Outlaws off to a bit of a slow start for the second half of the season. Outlaws 1-3 since the All-Star break, including a 4-0 shutout loss to the Nevada Griffins Monday night. Last night, up against Nevada once again, and Griffins win it again. This one 4-3. Nevada now, get this, 7-0 in league play against Joplin this summer. Royals catcher Salvador Perez put on a show and made a little history in the Major League Baseball Home Run Derby on Monday night. Now, he didn't win it, but he did hit 28 home runs in the first round. That's the most homers for a catcher in the history of the Home Run Derby. Good night for Salvador, but in the end, it was the Mets' Pete Alonso. Polar Bear took the title. Alonso hit 74 total home runs, capturing his second straight Home Run Derby championship.
I feel like I used pretty much the entire field. I mean, I was just focused on being locked in on hitting the sweet spot of the bat, and the balls just went wherever they went. I feel like my timing was consistent, my tempo was great, and my effort level was outstanding, and I was able to stay consistent and really kind of dominate.
Derby on Monday. Last night, the All-Star game as the American League wins it 5-2. You had 2 Cardinals and 2 Royals playing in last night's game, as Cards pitcher Alex Reyes picked up a strikeout in 2/3 of an inning on the mound for the National League. The winning pitcher won Shohei Ohtani after he opened the game and also led off the game for the American League. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., your All-Star MVP. Former Pittsburgh standout Marquette English had a unique basketball journey after high school. Played 3 different places in 3 years, and get this, still has 3 years of eligibility. We caught up with English to talk about his journey and what's next for the former 5A Player of the Year.
Marquette English is headed back to Butler County.
That home environment, being able to play basketball and do what I love to do, I just think it was the best move for me to go back to Butler. I was there for a year previously, and we went to the conference championship, and just to go back there and play basketball with Coach Fisher and the guys, and I think it'll be a lot of fun.
This spot is killing us.
His basketball journey has had multiple stops since graduating from Pittsburgh High in 2018. The former 5A Player of the Year signed to Linkier Prep out of high school, reclassifying to 2019. After a year, he made his first stop at Butler County in 2020 before heading to Northern Colorado, where he was able to get Division I experience.
We traveled a lot on the West Coast, Arizona, Montana, Utah. Just being able to be at that level and see everything is definitely something that was a really good experience.
English still has 3 years of eligibility, but is not thinking about what's after Butler.
Right now, I really just want to go play and go win a national tournament there at Butler, and then whatever comes from it, really, I just want to be able to play basketball.
In the meantime, he's working out in Pittsburgh, coaching, and using his experience to help younger players.
Mid-range Joey. Hey, threes.
I've been coaching out with Victory Ministries, and one of the things we preach to the boys is trying to get 1% better each day.
Good shot. Next spot.
That's my main thing, is I want to be able to be a role model for them, to show them that no matter where you start at, no matter where you end at, as long as you get better 1% each day, that eventually you're going to be able to make your goals.
In the 2019-2020 season, Marquette English posted 11 points and 6 rebounds per game at Butler, starting 33 of 34 games for the Grizzlies. Still to come on the KOAM Morning News, massive anti-government demonstrations.
Protests over the situation in Cuba spilling over into South Florida. I'm Phil Keating in Little Havana in Miami with the story coming up.
And to check on our 7-day forecast when the KOAM Morning News returns. Just past 5:17, roll a little weather on the 7s, and the closer that we get to 6:09, we'll turn the camera a little bit. 6:09 being sunrise over Joplin on this July the 14th. There's a live look at 7th and Rangeline where we sit at 76 degrees. We're also going to be paying not only attention to the temperature, but the wind as it comes in from the south, and it has picked up overnight. 73 in Pittsburgh, 74 in Neodesha, 70 in Monette, and 73 in Miami. Here's an idea of the wind tracker currently. You can tell those numbers increasing as we made it through the night and into the early morning, and it's not going to slow down. It's also providing us with double-digit increases from where we stood at this point in time yesterday. We had some low 60s out there on Tuesday. Now we're talking about mid-70s. Skywatch storm tracker, low light cloud cover, trying to move in, part of a low pressure system that we'll see in the upper plains here in just a second. But we got to check in on our flood warning. Hopefully for the Osage River, we can let that expire this afternoon. Now, speaking of that system that's feeding us some cloud cover, don't have to worry about the precipitation. You can just see the surrounding clouds there coming out of South Dakota and Nebraska. Majority of their storm reports so far have been high winds as this thing made its way through the western portions of those two states, and the severe thunderstorm risk map has that same system progressing toward the Great Lakes here all throughout the course of our Wednesday. It's rather impressive, the fact that it's going to stay that organized for that long and just follow along with the jet stream. Everybody underneath the jet stream going to be in for a couple hot ones here as our temperatures are going to make it up into the 90s. Factor in the humidity, factor in the wind, feeling like mid to high 90s for this afternoon. Now, normally, overnight is when our wind begins to calm down. That will not be the case. Those southerly gusts are going to keep up at 20 miles per hour. After a hot Wednesday, we're going to have a hot Thursday too, but Thursday is going to bring us additional developments, and that's going to be thunderstorm activity that's going to kick in late Thursday afternoon, sweep in from the northwest down to the southeast, and last all the way into Friday morning. Right now, we're not popping up on the severe thunderstorm risk map, so that's a good thing. And then Friday is going to bring us additional rainfall. Just no backing off the temperatures as we're going to stay in the high 80s for the entire weekend. Time now to turn our attention to the KOAM News Now Facebook page and our morning Insta poll. A majority of Americans agree when it comes to sticking to a budget, cash is still king. According to a new poll, 51% of Americans say using cash helps them stick to their budget. The poll surveying 1,500 Americans and determined even Gen Zers like to use cash in order to stay frugal. A majority of the respondents from all age groups like to have about, get this, $52 on them at all times, random number. 77% agreeing not having cash when you need it is a fear of theirs. Our question for you, what's your preferred method of payment? Cash, card, check, or mobile? You can let us know by going to our Facebook page or logging on to the Insta poll, koamnewsnow.com/vote. We'll be back with Health Watch after this.
Topping Health Watch this morning, for the millions of people struggling with depression, we want to help break the stigma and open the door to finding help. Our CBS News colleague in New York is sharing her painful and personal journey through depression and how she pulled through. Elise Preston has her story.
No matter how good somebody's life looks from the outside, they could be going through hell.
Cindy Shu's life did look good from the outside. An anchor and reporter at WCBS in New York and a mother of a young daughter. In 2015, she found herself in a life and death battle with mental illness, a battle no one saw coming.
You know me, Dana. We've known each other for a million years, and I'm like the happy person at work, always.
She shared her story with her close friend and colleague anchor Dana Tyler, describing how a coworker sensed something was wrong.
She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "No." And that was the first time I actually let down the wall. And that's when she said, "You need to take some time off." And I said, yes.
At home, her illness deepened.
Bottom line, I attempted suicide weeks after I had left work. You were by yourself? I was by myself. My daughter was away at camp. I attempted, and the hope was I wouldn't wake up.
She did wake up in the emergency room, confused and embarrassed.
You know, coming from an Asian family, we don't talk about things like this. You don't sit there and say, "I'm not feeling well, I feel down." It's more like you don't want to be a burden to anybody.
Cindy spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric hospital where therapy and group meetings helped her get better. Psychiatrist Christine Moutier hopes her candor will encourage others to seek those resources.
There are 1 in 4 Americans who are going through similar types of mental health experiences, and we just need to shine a light and take the stigma out of these topics.
For Cindy, the cloud is lifted, but her work continues.
I continue to see a psychiatrist every month. I'm still on medication, and I need that. But I feel great.
She's active with suicide prevention groups and speaks on panels, spreading the word there's no shame in asking for help. Elise Preston, CBS News, New York.
If you or someone you know needs help, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline Network has a 24/7 crisis hotline. 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. You can also text the word TALK to 741741, and you'll be able to talk with a trained crisis counselor. Doctors are sharing advice to help parents soothe their children after vaccines. Canadian researchers say trying to verbally calm a small child after vaccination does not help reduce distress. Doctors found cuddling, hugging, or hand-holding are better techniques. Researchers say 2 minutes after getting the shot, most children no longer feel distressed, but a quarter of young children still do. Concerning numbers on the potential impact of COVID on breast cancer survival rates. Researchers fear the pandemic could be to blame for nearly 2,500 national breast cancer deaths in the U.S. by 2030. A study in the Journal of National Cancer Institute shows pandemic shutdowns and precautions reduced mammograms by 80%. Doctors say treatment also suffered significant delays. That's a look at some of today's top health stories. You're watching the KOAM Morning News.
It'll be hot and windy today as temperatures are already in the 70s. Coming in from the south, we'll have some 20-mile-per-hour gusts here by the afternoon hours, topping out around 91. Be back right after this.
Coming up, Southeast Kansas health officials say the numbers show vaccinations work. Why it's a lack of those vaccinations that's delaying an end to the pandemic. And local school districts consider how they're going to respond to CDC guidance for students returning to the classroom. Also, how Joplin businesses are pushing for a more inclusive community.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
Good morning and welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 5:30. I'm Zach Dodge, and it already is muggy outside, and the sun isn't even up yet.
I know, Zach, we still have 39 minutes until sunrise, and we're already talking about sitting at 76 degrees over 7th and Range Line. With that humidity, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be here all day long. A whole lot of Gulf moisture's already moved in. 75 in Carthage, 74 in Parsons and Miami. Let's go a pair of 73s for Fort Scott and Nevada. Also, too, it's going to be a little bit windy out there. Yet to really see anything above, say, 15 miles per hour, but we're going to gust about 20 to 25 miles per hour this afternoon. All the thunderstorm activity rides the jet stream to the far north of us, makes its way across the Great Plains, heads towards the Great Lakes. So we just need to worry about trying to stay cool because it's going to be in the low 90s, feeling about like 96, 97 though this afternoon. Now, eventually we are going to get some rain out of this, but we're going to have to wait until tomorrow. And as it does formulate, it'll begin up to our northwest, kind of a combination of the heat pushing down from the jet stream and also, too, the Gulf moisture moving in from the south. And there we go. We get on it for the afternoon, and it carries us all the way into Friday. No backing off, though, as we're going to be high 80s all the way through the end of the weekend.
See,
there's a little break there in between Sunday and Monday.
Right, for sure. And I'm not super used to being awake this early in the morning yet.
That's
and
all
so going outside and it being humid already, that's like
I know.
a weird sensation.
Walk out there, you're like, whoa, it's going to be a heck of an afternoon.
It's going to be a heck of an afternoon, but thank you very much, Michael. Crawford County Health Department and Ascension Via Christi Hospital held a press conference at Pitt State. Officials say the county is seeing its 4th major spike in COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. The vast majority of those new cases, along with every recent death, are people who have not been vaccinated. Health officials reiterated that the vaccines are safe and recommended.
If we are going to see breakthrough cases where someone's fully vaccinated and still gets COVID, that is not a vaccine failure. If they stay out of the hospital, that's a vaccine success story. And so I think that's what we need to reiterate to people.
Just under 50% of the county's population has received at least one dose of a vaccine. Area school officials consider how they're going to respond to CDC guidance for students returning to school this fall. Last week's guidance from the CDC falls in line with their previous advice on masking for vaccinated adults. It says that fully vaccinated students do not need to wear masks in classrooms. The Jasper County Health Department says how COVID cases and vaccination rates look closer to the school year will dictate how schools operate.
We have no way of knowing exactly what our case rate's going to be when school starts. I hope it's much less than it is now. The biggest way to do that, to get there, is to increase vaccinations and social distancing.
The health department says the best way to reduce spread is by getting vaccinated, which happened Tuesday at Freeman Health System in Joplin. The hospital hosted a back-to-school vaccine clinic. Kids age 12 and up who were accompanied by a parent could come through and get a shot.
In the area that I work in, we see COVID all day, every day, and we're seeing the numbers really increase. And since they made it so the kids could get the shots, they've decreased the age, then I decided to get them vaccinated.
Second doses of the vaccine will be given out on August 11th. A new hardware store and jobs are coming to Frontenac, Kansas. The Harbor Freight Tools chain says it expects to open a store at 1007 North Highway 69 late this summer, but has not given an official date. Construction is underway, and the company says the store will bring 25 to 30 new jobs. Harbor Freight currently has more than 1,200 stores nationwide. A number of Joplin area businesses say they're committed to creating a more diverse, welcoming, and inclusive community, and they were recognized at a news conference on Tuesday. The Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce and its Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Work Group formally announced the launch of their Joplin Leadership Pledge. But dozens of companies and groups have already signed the pledge. The EDI group says the goal is to ensure that companies and individuals create cultures that are welcoming and support everyone.
These individuals work in our businesses, and right now, talent attraction is a challenge for many businesses in our community. We want to make sure we have a community where everyone feels like they belong.
To learn more or to sign the pledge, visit choosejoplin.com/pledge. Young Lego fans have a chance to get their creations put on display in Fort Scott, Kansas. The Museum of Creativity is testing out a Lego club. Kids aged 10 to 18 are able to participate and build according to a theme. The top 3 builds from each week's session will be displayed in the museum. The museum is using the session as a test to gauge community interest in the Lego Club. That's a look at our top news stories. Coming up this half hour on the KOAM Morning News, it's Wildcat Wednesday, and we hear from a horticulture agent on how you can be a master gardener. Plus, a wave of anti-government demonstrations grow. We'll have the latest as protests gain widespread support in the U.S. But first, it's 5:36.
Hot and windy. It's going to be up into the 90s later on today, and our wind gusts will be anywhere from about 20 to 25 miles per hour. It's breezy right now, but it'll really pick up here during the afternoon. And the wind will actually stay with us overnight, and it's going to be very warm. Next shot for thunderstorm activity, that is going to be Thursday afternoon all the way into Friday morning. We'll be back with World Watch next.
World Watch. Hundreds of Cuban Americans gathered in South Florida over the past several days to protest conditions on the island nation. Fox News correspondent Phil Keating has the latest.
Miami's Little Havana filled up with hundreds of Cuban Americans showing support for their Cuban brothers and sisters on the island and once again calling for change in the communist country. For more than an hour this afternoon, they even shut down traffic on a Miami highway by blocking the lanes. And Miami's mayor suggesting the U.S. might explore military intervention.
Are you suggesting airstrikes in Cuba?
What I'm suggesting is that that option is one that has to be explored and cannot be just simply discarded as an option that is not on the table.
Around Havana yesterday, a noticeably beefed up military presence and government loyalists on mostly protest-free streets. The internet and social media platforms were shut down and remain so today. Contrast with the unprecedented public protests on the island Sunday, defiance to the communist government in about a dozen cities. The Miami Herald reporting that Raul Castro came out of retirement to attend an emergency meeting of the Communist Party's Politburo to deal with Sunday's island-wide protests. New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez spoke briefly with President Biden on what can be done.
We have to help create greater technological access for internet access inside of Cuba. The regime constantly shuts down the internet when there are protests so that Cubans can't speak to each other.
Florida's governor and a local congressman held a roundtable this afternoon with Cuban Americans in Miami.
They've taken everything away from us, including our fear. And you know what? When the Cuban people no longer fear the Cuban government, it's the beginning of the end.
And last night and today, Cuban Americans loading a small flotilla of boats with cases of water and cans of food, aiming to deliver them to the Cuban people who are suffering from chronic food shortages. It's highly unlikely the Cuban government will allow them in.
Cuban forces have reportedly arrested 50 to 100 dissidents over the past 2 days, all accused of helping to organize the big demonstrations on Sunday, which in communist Cuba are forbidden. Violence continues to escalate on the streets of South Africa, with the death toll rising to 32. Crowds continue to clash with police following the imprisonment of South Africa's former president. The riots taking over shopping centers as security forces struggle to keep the scores of people from looting stores and other destructive lawlessness. Many of the deaths occurred in the stampedes. On Monday, South Africa's president deployed more than 2,500 soldiers in an effort to quell the escalating civil unrest. A deadly hotel collapse kills at least 8 people on Monday. Crews are rushing to save people after a building collapsed in the eastern part of China. In addition to the deceased, a number of people are injured while others are missing. More than 650 rescue workers are working to remove the rubble while also trying to keep up the remaining structure with various ropes. Officials have concerns about the rest of the building, so no heavy machinery was brought in to the site except 2 cranes, which operated from a safe distance. The First Lady is headed to the Tokyo Olympics. The White House confirmed Dr. Jill Biden will lead the U.S. delegation for her second time. The last time she participated was in the Vancouver Winter Games in 2010, accompanied by then Vice President Joe Biden. The First Lady will be going by herself this time to lead the delegation, similar to former First Lady Michelle Obama at the London Games. The announcement comes after Japan recently declared spectators aren't allowed in the Games, and the country is under a state of emergency due to the pandemic. That's a look at some of your biggest headlines from around the world. Now let's toss it over to Michael for our Something to Talk About.
Thank you, Zach, on the KOAM News Now Facebook page. What's up, Liam Mandelbaum? That's our
Liam,
he's
right there.
That guy who just pops up, that's TV magic right there.
That was great.
The dude does everything. He helps produce the show. He puts together our Zoom interviews. He's down here running camera, running teleprompter.
Yep, running my prompter when I can't reach the
knob. I
knob.
wish you would have been quicker with a thumbs up for us. This early, Liam, I know. You do a heck of a job, man. There you go. KOAM News Now Facebook page and morning Insta poll. Cash is still king. This is according to a new poll. It says 51% of Americans say using cash helps them stick to a budget. Poll surveyed 1,500 Americans, determined even Gen Zers like to use cash in order to stay frugal. Majority of the respondents from all age groups like for some reason to have $52 on them at all times.
I feel like that's $50 to have $50. And then $2 for the vending machines.
I was going to go toll roads. I'm with you.
Okay.
All right. Zach goes vending machines. I go toll roads. Our question to you, what's your preferred method of payment? Zach, right now I've got 35% of people saying card. I can't read. Zach, you point to it. Just point straight down. You'll be fine. There you go.
Cool. Yeah, there we go.
You got this whole Insta poll thing down, man. You can make your voice heard by going to KOAMnewsnow.com/vote. Be back with a Wildcat Wednesday right after this.
How can I...
Here's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door. President Biden is vowing to do whatever he can to protect voting rights. The president denounced the Republican-led efforts to enact restrictive state election laws as being un-American and an assault on democracy. Crawford County Health Department and Ascension Via Christi Hospital officials held a press conference at Pitt State. Officials say the county is seeing its 4th major spike in COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. The vast majority of those new cases, along with every recent death, are people who have not been vaccinated. Health officials reiterated that the vaccines are safe and recommended. Just under 50% of the county's population has received at least 1 dose of a vaccine. Area school officials consider how they'll respond to CDC guidance for students returning to school this fall. Last week's guidance from the CDC falls in line with their previous advice on masking for vaccinated adults. It says that fully vaccinated students and teachers do not need to wear masks in classrooms. The Jasper County Health Department says how COVID cases and vaccinations look closer to the school year will dictate how schools operate. The health department says the best way to reduce the spread is by getting vaccinated. A number of Joplin area businesses say they're committed to creating a more diverse, welcoming, and inclusive community. The Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce and its Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Work Group formally announced the launch of their Joplin Leadership Pledge. Dozens of companies and groups have already signed the pledge. The EDI group says the goal is to ensure that companies and individuals create cultures that are welcoming and supportive of everyone. That's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door.
It's already pretty warm. We're talking about temperatures in the mid-70s, and we still got a ways to go before we even get to sunrise. So this will end up being our hottest day of the week, all the way up into the low 90s. Feeling about like mid to high 90s when you factor in, number one, the south wind that's going to be blowing pretty good all the way through the nighttime hours. And still very warm overnight. Now, next big development rain-wise, that's going to be Thursday afternoon, as we've got a stalled out front that's going to collide with the Gulf moisture that's going to make it so humid for today and bring us rain that'll last all the way in to Friday morning. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the KOAM Morning News, and we find ourselves on a Wildcat Wednesday. You know, now that we've turned the calendar into July and luckily got rid of the majority of the rain that we had at the end of the month. I know everybody's chomping at the bit to get outside, get some fresh air, and maybe work in that garden. Well, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Jesse Gilmore. Jesse from the K-State Research and Extension Office is part of our Wildcat Wednesday. Jesse, you're a horticulture agent, and we brought you on today because many people may have heard of the term Master Gardener, and you've got some of these classes coming up. But man, does that sound intimidating on the surface.
Yeah, anytime you append master to the beginning of something, it kind of evokes the idea that you should be an expert in the topic. And honestly, that has kind of scared some people away from doing the Master Gardener program at all. But we provide a lot of the training for master gardeners, and usually that happens from September to mid-November, typically, if you're doing in-person. Last year, obviously, we couldn't really do in-person classes, so we switched to an online format for that year, and we did 14 weeks of 3-hour classes, which I think was much more digestible for the people who showed up. But those topics range from like basic plant science all the way to landscape design. It covers the gambit of horticultural topics, really.
And so what you're telling me is I don't have to feel like I'm a master coming in. What you're trying to do is attract people that may be interested to this and provide them with future educational opportunities.
Yes, so the Master Gardener program provides the basic training every fall, and then the kind of expectation is that the people who receive the training get out into the community and do some horticulture-based volunteer work. And I've been lucky enough to have some volunteers who are really go-getters. One in particular has already volunteered over 100 hours since the end of her training in December. And volunteering can really take a lot of different forms. It doesn't necessarily just have to be gardening. There can also be education-related volunteering and administrative-related volunteering. For example, if there's a class that needs to be taught in a particular area and someone feels comfortable enough to teach it, they can get volunteer hours that way.
And the important thing is that it doesn't matter which of the 4 states we're talking about. The Master Gardener program allows you to begin with the foundation and the building blocks to hopefully, it's a life skill. And not a life skill, but it can be a lifelong hobby and maybe turn it into something more. Jesse, for those of you that want to get in touch with you, they want to become a part of your Master Gardening class and program, how do they do that?
They can find an application on our district website. It will basically kind of spell out the basic plan for this year's training. Our training for the Wildcat District, which is the unit that I'm responsible for, will be held in Parsons this year. From September 2nd, I believe, to December 16th. They can call or email me, 620-724-8233 for the office that I'm in. or they can visit our website to find an application to print out and send in.
And I think the great thing is you've given people plenty of ample time, Jesse, to jot down those questions that they can bring you when class begins. Jesse Gilmore from the Wildcat Extension District on this Wildcat Wednesday. Jesse, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll be back with more KOAM Morning News right after this.
It's high winds.
All quiet outside of Television City. We was watching the tree limbs move a little bit because we've got a pretty good southerly breeze. It's only going to increase through Wednesday morning and into the afternoon, feeding us much warmer temperatures. We were talking about 60s yesterday. How about 76 right now in Joplin and Chanute? Miami's at 74 and 75s in Lamar and in Carthage. Up the thermometer we go to the point where it's going to feel about like 96, 97 later on this afternoon. Top out actual temperature-wise, about 91 degrees. Don't have to worry about any thunderstorm activity for today. That will change tunes tomorrow afternoon as it rolls in from the northwest and proceeds off to the east, southeast, but no break from the temperatures, high 80s into the weekend.
Coming up, Southeast Kansas health officials say the numbers show vaccinations work. Why it's a lack of those vaccinations that's delaying an end to the pandemic. And local school districts consider how they're going to respond to CDC guidance for students returning to the classroom. Also, how Joplin businesses are pushing for a more inclusive community.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
Good morning and welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 6 a.m. I'm Zach Dodge and now I'm going to toss it to Michael Hayslip in studio in the Skywatch Weather Center. Yeah, that place.
You can call it, you can name it a studio. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the studio.
Wait, well, you can give it its own letter. Pick a letter.
I was going to say Studio K because
right,
you say that all the time, but you refer to over
here
as that.
I like it. Zach, we've got 9 minutes till official sunrise over 7th and Rangeline there in Joplin. Two things that we're paying attention to. Number one, the temperature. Number two, the wind. Currently rocking at 13 miles per hour in from the south. 75 in Joplin, 73 in both Parsons and Oswego. 70s now in Monette and Cassville, finally getting up to 70. The wind is going to increase all day long. Eventually, we're going to be talking about 15 to 20 miles per hour. So even though it's a nice little breeze right now, there will be an uptick in it. Skywatch Storm Tracker for us stays clear as all the thunderstorm activity will simply follow the jet stream over the upper plains, make its way toward the Great Lake for today. Speaking of today, it is going to be sunny. It is going to be hot, about 91 degrees, feeling like anywhere from 96 to 97 later on this afternoon. And overnight, yes, usually when that wind's able to die down a little bit. Not going to be the case. The southerly gusts will maintain at 20 miles per hour. Now, speaking of overnight, that'll transition us into Thursday. And Thursday is going to bring us some thunderstorm activity. We won't get started until the afternoon hours. And when we do, got a band that comes in diagonally, rolls through and carries us all the way into Friday morning. No reprieve from the temperatures, though. Not one of those that can usher in a cold front. We're going to be stuck in the high 80s all weekend long.
All right. Thank you very much, Michael. And I just thought of something. What about Studio W for weather?
You what?
Studio W for weather.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounded better in my head.
Every time you pitch it to me, I'm just going to throw up the W's.
Cool.
There you go.
Thanks, Michael. Crawford County Health and Ascension Via Christi Hospital officials held a press conference at Pitt State. Officials say the county is seeing its fourth major spike in COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. The vast majority of those new cases, along with every recent death, are people who have not been vaccinated. Health officials reiterated that the vaccines are safe and recommended.
If we are going to see breakthrough cases where someone's fully vaccinated and still gets COVID, that is not a vaccine failure. If they stay out of the hospital, that's a vaccine success story. And so I think that's what we need to reiterate to people.
And to provide updates.
Just under 50% of the county's population has received at least one dose of a vaccine. Area school officials consider how they'll respond to CDC guidance for students returning to school this fall. Last week's guidance from the CDC falls in line with their previous advice on masking for vaccinated adults. It says that fully vaccinated students and teachers do not need to wear masks in classrooms. The Jasper County Health Department says how COVID cases and vaccination rates look closer to the school year will dictate how schools operate.
We have no way of knowing exactly what our case rate's going to be when school starts. I hope it's much less than it is now. The biggest way to do that, to get there, is to increase vaccinations and social distancing.
The health department says the best way to reduce spread is by getting vaccinated. A number of Joplin area businesses say they're committed to creating a more diverse, welcoming, and inclusive community. The Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce and its Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Work Group formally announced the launch of their Joplin Leadership Pledge. But dozens of companies and groups have already signed the pledge. The EDI group says the goal is to ensure that companies and individuals create cultures that are welcoming and supportive of everyone.
Work in our businesses, and right now talent attraction is a challenge for many businesses in our community. We want to make sure we have a community where everyone feels like they belong.
To learn more or to sign the pledge, visit choosejoplin.com/pledge. Young Lego fans have a chance to get their creations put on display in Fort Scott, Kansas. The Museum of Creativity is testing out a Lego club. Kids ages 10 to 18 are able to participate and build according to a theme. The top 3 builds from each week's sessions will be displayed in the museum.
I'm learning from them too. Like, they do something and I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. And I mean, that happens when I'm teaching crafts too. Like, someone will do it a certain way and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So I'm learning too, you know, I learn from them. We all think differently. And we all create, you know, a society where we can help each other and learn and grow.
The museum is using the session as a test to gauge community interest in the Lego Club. A group of campers in Joplin are learning how to be lifeguards. And KOAM photojournalist Ty Park shows us, for one camper, it's a family tradition.
Because that was my mom's first job and I really like lifeguarding and swimming. And I would love to learn how to safely save someone out of the water.
Just like a foot in the door of how to be trained as a lifeguard, so that way when they become old enough, when they're 15, if they want to actually be a lifeguard, then they kind of already know a lot of this stuff.
So get your arms more under the He doesn't have his whistle on. Alright, you guys can swim. You don't have to take all the way.
To learn how to do better swimming and learn stuff like that, because I go to the lake a lot, so I can save someone if they're drowning or something like that. It'll make me feel better because I'm scared that I'm not going to accomplish being a lifeguard, because it's a while, it's in about 5 years, so it's a long ways away, but it's also exciting knowing that I could accomplish that.
Good job, Ty. Camp runs through the rest of the week. Registration is $100, and campers must, of course, be strong swimmers. It's 6:07.
And it's going to be a hot one. Our temperatures that are already in the 70s are going to cruise past 80 degrees probably by 9 a.m. Usually, sometimes we're like, yeah, we'll be up, or, get past the 80s by 11. Nah, not today. It's not going to take that long. Good southerly breeze as well, coming in at 15 to 20 miles per hour. Really don't have to worry about thunderstorm activity till Thursday afternoon.
That's a look at this morning's top stories and weather in our first 7 minutes. Coming up on the KOAM Morning News, we continue with our Wildcat Wednesday and what goes into judging clothing at the county fair. Also, a surge in COVID cases.
I'm Natalie Brand with the states the CDC is monitoring for a surge in COVID cases, plus why health officials say more data is needed on a potential booster shot.
Plus, the results of a new survey of the best places to live and how the pandemic changed people's minds. You're watching the KOAM Morning News. More real news in the morning. We'll be right back. In Consumer Watch this morning, Boulder, Colorado tops the list of best places to live according to U.S. News and World Report. The city's job market fared better during the pandemic than those in other metro areas, and Boulder meets other top criteria for people who say the pandemic has changed their mind about where to live. CBS's Michael George reports from New York.
If you're looking to move, Boulder, Colorado may be the place. The city topped U.S. News and World Report's list of best places to live for the second consecutive year. Realtor and Boulder resident Alex Miller isn't surprised.
It's just a fantastic place to live. I love getting out and hiking. I'm a big runner, so it's a very friendly spot.
Boulder's best qualities include its outdoorsy lifestyle and a strong job market.
Despite the fact that the entire country experienced skyrocketing unemployment throughout 2020, Boulder's market was able to remain relatively stable and keep unemployment rates pretty low.
The magazine looks at data on the country's 150 most populous metro areas and weighs it against responses from a desirability survey of more than 3,600 people nationwide. Rounding out the top 5, Raleigh and Durham, North Carolina, Huntsville, Alabama, Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Austin, Texas.
They certainly offer kind of the amenities of a big city that people want to see, but it also has sprawling suburbs and areas that allow people to get outdoors. They don't necessarily feel so packed in.
New York City actually tied Boulder as the 10th most desirable place to live. But what bumps the Big Apple down the overall list is the price tag.
These biggest cities in the country and their surrounding metro areas are unfortunately for a lot of people not that easy to afford.
U.S. News and World Report says for a third of Americans, the pandemic has changed their opinion about where they live, and 11% have already moved or plan to do so. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
U.S. News and World Report also says we may see some big differences in migration in a couple of years as a result of the pandemic. A Russian cyber gang responsible for recent ransomware attacks has vanished from the internet. R-Evil, short for Ransomware Evil, was identified as the group that attacked beef producer JBS in May. Early Tuesday morning, cyber experts noted the sites it uses on the dark web had disappeared. It's unclear why the sites went down and if U.S. or Russian law enforcement are responsible. Coca-Cola Zero Sugar is getting a recipe change. Coca-Cola says it's part of an effort to make the drink taste more like regular Coke. It's also making the can more red to look like its sugary counterpart. The changes roll out this month. That's it for Consumer Watch. Now let's toss it over to Michael with a look at the forecast.
Zach, we've been talking about how warm it's going to be today. Check out what happened in 1954. Record for your July 14th, 115 degrees.
Woo, that's hot.
Barely even fits on the old screen right there. It was so hot. Outside of Television City, we're off to a gorgeous start. Here's 7th and Rangeline. I bet you we can get a real nice picture of this here. That's why I love live TV. Look at that. At the changing of the colors, sun getting ready to come over the sky, the tree line right there. We're just 5 minutes past sunrise in Joplin, and we're already at 75 degrees. 74 in Lamar and Neodesha, 74 in Miami, and Carthage as well. Wind's going to come in from the south all day long, do so at about 10 to 15 this morning, and then 15 to 20 miles an hour here a little bit later. Comparatively speaking, just about everybody enjoying a double-digit increase in the temps compared to where we were at 6:15 on a Tuesday. That's reflectivity picked up by the radar. We're going to stay on the dry side. Have seen a lot of that cloud cover from that system up through South Dakota, Nebraska, now moving into Iowa. It gives you an idea how large that thing is and the fact that it's able to kick some clouds our way. But we'll stay on the dry side, which is a good thing for today. because we need to get rid of that flood warning. Hopefully we can let that expire this afternoon for the Osage River. Backing off, you'll see that that storm system we were just talking about is going to head toward the Great Lakes, stay way far to the north of us, and just kind of ride that jet stream all the way through. We're going to make it up around 91 degrees, feel like 96, 97 here later on this afternoon. And then on Thursday, and we can talk some thunderstorm activity. It'll develop out to the northwest, won't be here until the late afternoon, evening hours. And as it rolls through, it's going to last all the way into Friday. No backing off our temperatures though, high 80s as we head into the weekend. Be back with more KOAM Morning News right after this. Welcome back to the KOAM Morning News on this Wildcat Wednesday. It has been a century since the first Montgomery County, Kansas Fair took place, and we're celebrating 100 years. And we've got a special guest on with us this morning for this Wildcat Wednesday. It's Sarah Schwatkin. Sarah, this summer, is interning for the Wildcat District of the Kansas State Research and Extension Office. Sarah, number one, congratulations on the internship. Number two, I understand you're going to take me through what goes into judging clothing at a county fair, because you know we immediately think of livestock, we think horses, and when it comes to judging and whatnot, sometimes we forget about some of the finer aspects that you great 4-Hers learn during this process. Why don't we start with the dress that you have in your hands there?
So this is my formal dress, and what I looked whenever I bought for it, I just looked like how it would look with my skin tone and just the length, and made sure that it fit really well, because that's basically what the judge looks for when they judge your clothing.
So what is the judging process like when it comes to the clothing aspect of it? Is there a question and answer format? Do you have to explain yourself in any means about why you made the decisions? And what's it like being a participant?
So you have a judging sheet, and basically that is where you put your price per wear, you put the description of your clothing, why you chose the clothing, where you would wear the clothing, and then the actual modeling, you put on your clothing, and then you go to the judge. They have you walk a couple steps, turn around, see, and make sure it fits everywhere correctly, and then they may ask you some more questions on why you picked your outfit.
So this is something that you've taken part in the past, right?
Yes.
What are some of the tricks of the trade and tips that you've learned through being part of the 4-H clothing and the judging that you've been able to apply to your real life?
Just basically pick casual clothing that you will wear like every day. Then the judges really like that, and they will give you a higher ribbon because like you actually like what you're wearing.
Since you're interning out there in Montgomery County, I do have one question that I'd like you to leave the audience with, and that is, during your time in 4-H, what have you taken out that from where you started to where you are now as a young woman, and why did you want to intern with the Wildcat District?
So I've been in 4-H since I was 7, the legal 4-H age, and I just love the responsibility it gives, the leadership, all of those aspects, and you also get to meet a lot of kids that you wouldn't regularly get to meet all around the county. So I wanted the internship so that I could help mentor and just really see what goes into like all the behind the scenes work for the fair and just every area of 4-H.
Sarah, number one, congratulations on the internship. Number two, 4 states very fortunate enough to have young people like you that want to pass down what they've learned and be a mentor for those younger students. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Hey, best of luck too with the clothing contest, okay?
Thank you so much.
All right, special thanks to Sarah Schwatkin. She is the intern out in Montgomery County for the Wildcat District. Right behind the camera, the wonderful Katie Townsend. Katie, thank you for your time. And if anybody has the opportunity, once again, I want to remind you that this is the Montgomery County Fair Edition 100. Congratulations to all of you out in Montgoco. We'll be back with more KOAM Morning News right after this.
Win-win.
Topping Health Watch this morning, the FDA is warning that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been linked to a rare autoimmune disease. The vaccine was linked to Guillain-Barré syndrome in about 100 people out of nearly 13 million people who received the shot. Public health experts say the benefits of the vaccine still far outweigh the risks. Natalie Brand reports from Washington.
The spread of the fast-moving Delta variant across the U.S. is putting increased pressure on Americans who have yet to get vaccinated.
Any variant that emerges concerns us because of possibility that it's more transmissible. It may change the severity of illness.
The CDC is monitoring a surge in COVID cases in states across the South and West, especially in under-vaccinated areas.
A lot of the behavior that I think is driving spread of infection is people wanting it to be over and acting as if it's over, and really abandoning even the more modest precautions like mask wearing that would help.
Orange County, Florida has joined the list of places now recommending that people go back to wearing masks indoors, even if fully vaccinated. The CDC says the current vaccines stand up to the Delta variant. The agency's advisory committee has scheduled a meeting for next week to discuss vaccine safety. On Monday, the FDA added a new warning to Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine, saying the shot may be linked to a very rare neurological disorder known as Guillain-Barré syndrome.
People with viral and bacterial infections can get an autoimmune reaction against the nerves in their body, and it happens occasionally with vaccines.
Doctors say the benefits of the J&J shot still outweigh potential risk. But as discussion turns to the potential for booster shots, U.S. health officials say more data is needed.
There's ongoing work with FDA to determine if and when and for whom booster doses would be indicated.
Pfizer met with Biden administration health officials this week to talk about preliminary booster data, and the National Institutes of Health has launched a clinical trial of its own. Natalie Brandt, CBS News, Washington.
President Biden and Dr. Anthony Fauci will meet with pop star and actress Olivia Rodrigo at the White House Wednesday to stress the importance of young people getting vaccinated. That's a look at some of today's top health stories. You're watching the KOAM Morning News.
Here we are, Zach. Beautiful shot outside of Television City. The sun just creeping over the trees. Zach providing us with a little John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
Yep.
I loved it. That was absolutely perfect. I told him to work that in. You're good at this whole TV thing. 75 in Joplin and Chanute, 73 in Miami and Nevada, and now we've got Cassville and Monette that have finally crept up to that 70-degree mark. We had to wait just a little bit to get them there. It's going to be a hot one no matter where you are. We're talking about 91 degrees. Feel about, say 96, 97 later on this afternoon. Stay on the dry side until the thunderstorm activity begins to work in Thursday afternoon and carries us into Friday morning.
Coming up, Southeast Kansas health officials say the numbers show vaccinations work. Why it's the lack of those vaccinations that's delaying an end to the pandemic. And local school districts consider how they're going to respond to CDC guidance for students returning to the classroom. Also, how Joplin businesses are pushing for a more inclusive community.
The 4 states' most watched news starts now.
Good morning and welcome to the KOAM Morning News. It's 6:30. I'm Zach Dodge, and now we're going to go over to Michael Hayslip in Studio W now with a look at the weather. There it is.
Now the weather.
Now the weather.
Sun beginning just to creep over the trees there at 7th and Rangeline, Zach. Just an absolutely gorgeous Wednesday morning here in the 4 states, and a warm Wednesday as well. 75 degrees is where we stand in Joplin. We'll hit on the wind here in just a little bit. But now that we have no more 60s on the board, we range everywhere from 70 to 75 degrees. And we were up in the 70s here pre-sunrise. Wind will continue to increase today. Eventually, we'll see 10 to 15 miles per hour and 20 mile an hour gusts. Excuse me. Now, see this cloud cover that's worked in from the north? We started off clear as can be. And this is actually part of a much larger system. We don't need to worry about the rain out of this, but this thing has expanded geographically. It's now almost reaching down to the Iowa-Kansas state line, pushing into Iowa, out of Nebraska. At one point in time, this thing was isolated to 2 states. Now it's encompassing 4 states, though in the cloud cover, and it encompasses about 6 states. As far as what we've got for warnings, yeah, still hanging on to the one for the Osage River there up until about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Hopefully we can let that expire because that large system won't impede upon us. It'll move toward the Great Lakes, and we will stay dry on this Wednesday. Going to feel about like 96, 97 this afternoon with 20 mile an hour gusts even after the sun goes down. the wind will still persist. So that's bringing in some Gulf moisture with the southerly breeze. What's that going to do? Well, eventually it's going to build up so much that on Thursday, it's going to have to find somewhere to go. And so Thursday afternoon, that's when the rain will start. It'll roll through. At times we'll get some heavy rain with it as well, as it lasts all the way through Friday morning. And the 7-day forecast shows us really not cooling down after that. So it'll be interesting to see if we can get that one flood warning for the Osage to go ahead and expire, and then hopefully not pick up enough that we have to, put it back into motion for Friday morning.
That would definitely be nice.
Yeah,
to let it just expire and kind of go away.
Let's get away from the watches and warnings here for a little bit.
Definitely, but thank you very much, Michael. Crawford County Health and Ascension Via Christi Hospital officials hold a press conference at Pitt State. Officials say the county is seeing its fourth major spike in COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. The vast majority of those new cases, along with every recent death, are people who have not been vaccinated. Health officials reiterated that the vaccines are safe and recommended.
If we are going to see breakthrough cases where someone's fully vaccinated and still gets COVID, that is not a vaccine failure. If they stay out of the hospital, that's a vaccine success story. And so I think that's what we need to reiterate to people.
And to provide
Just under 50% of the county's population has received at least one dose of a vaccine. Area school officials consider how they'll respond to CDC guidance for students returning to school this fall. Last week's guidance from the CDC falls in line with their previous advice on masking for vaccinated adults. It says that fully vaccinated students and teachers do not need to wear masks in classrooms. The Jasper County Health Department says how COVID cases and vaccination rates look closer to the school year will dictate how schools operate.
We have no way of knowing exactly what our case rate's going to be when school starts. I hope it's much less than it is now. The biggest way to do that, to get there, is to increase vaccinations and social distancing.
The health department says the best way to reduce the spread is by getting vaccinated. A new hardware store and jobs are coming to Frontenac, Kansas. The Harbor Freight Tools chain says it expects to open a store at 1007 North Highway 69 late this summer. There hasn't been an official date given yet, but construction is underway. The company says the store will bring 25 to 30 new jobs. Harbor Freight currently has more than 1,200 stores nationwide. A number of Joplin area businesses say they're committed to creating a more diverse, welcoming, and inclusive community. The Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce and its Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Work Group formally announced the launch of their Joplin Leadership Pledge. Dozens of companies and groups have already signed up, and the EDI group says the goal is to ensure that companies and individuals create cultures that are welcoming and supportive of everyone.
These individuals work in our businesses, and right now talent attraction is a challenge for many businesses in our community. We want to make sure we have a community where everyone feels like they belong.
To learn more or to sign the pledge, visit choosejoplin.com/pledge. Lincoln County, Missouri prosecutor is going for the death penalty against Pam Hupp for a new murder charge. Hupp was convicted in a 2016 murder in O'Fallon, Missouri. Now prosecutors say new evidence connects her to another murder a decade ago. Russell Kinsall has more.
I've constantly said that they did a very poor investigation. In fact, I've compared them to the Three Stooges.
Prosecuting attorney Mike Wood said the previous prosecutor and detectives never once considered Pam Hupp as a suspect.
This was one of the poorest examples of investigative work that I, as well as my team, have ever encountered, driven largely by ego, working toward an agenda rather than truth.
News 4 obtained these crime scene photos that appear to show socks that were placed over a hand, then used to transfer blood to other parts of the house. Notice on the socks, you don't see foot or toe imprints. Wood says the crime scene was staged to make it look like a crime of rage. Faria was stabbed 55 times. Pam Hupp was the last person to see Betsy Faria. She had convinced Faria to make her the beneficiary on a $150,000 life insurance policy just 4 days before the killing, and phone records showed Hupp's phone in the area at the time of the crime. Husband Russ Faria was convicted of killing his wife, but in a second trial was exonerated, and then Lincoln County paid him $2 million to settle a lawsuit. Wood is launching an investigation into how the case was previously handled.
During the course of my investigation into Betsy Faria's death, I came across information that could potentially lead to criminal prosecution.
Wood says 3 sources have told him witnesses were asked to lie on the stand, and he said the previous sheriff sought to have the evidence destroyed. Hupp is currently serving a life sentence in prison. She was convicted of killing Louis Gumpenberger and trying to blame someone else in an attempt to deflect attention after the Faria case had been reopened.
I was always hopeful, but I wasn't always sure that I'd see the day until Mike Woods called me and told me that this was going to happen.
Pam Hupp has repeatedly denied having any involvement in Betsy Faria's murder. That's a look at our top news stories. Coming up this half hour on the KOAM Morning News, the president's forceful message.
Strong messaging from the president after dozens of Texas Democrats flee the state. I'm Laura Podesta with the latest on the fight for voting rights.
Plus, for our Something to Talk About, we're asking, what's your preferred method of payment? We let you weigh in, but first, it's 6:38.
And it's going to be a hot one, Zach. Temperatures up into the low 90s later on today and a good deal of humidity. Combine that with a strong south wind as well. We'll be back with Nation Watch next.
Topping Nation Watch this morning, dozens of Texas Democrats have fled their state to prevent new voting legislation by their Republican colleagues. President Biden delivered a forceful message against the national attack on voting rights yesterday. CBS's Laura Podesta has more.
Have you no shame?
Speaking at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, President Biden scolded Republicans for their attacks on voting rights.
They want to be able to tell you your vote doesn't count for any reason they make up.
Since President Biden defeated Donald Trump, legislatures in 17 states have passed 28 laws that make it harder to vote.
The 21st century Jim Crow assault is real.
The former president continues to claim widespread voter fraud despite no evidence.
They used COVID in order to rig the election.
Republicans have rallied behind him, claiming their legislation is needed to prevent fraud.
Easy to vote, but hard to cheat.
In Texas, the GOP introduced a measure that would scale back vote by mail, give more rights to partisan poll watchers, and criminalize drive-through voting and other measures aimed at making voting easier.
The motion fails for lack of quorum.
To prevent the bill from passing, more than 50 Texas Democrats left the state, grinding a special session to a halt.
They want politicians from California and New York to tell us how to run our elections in Texas.
The Democrats flew to Washington, D.C. and are calling on Congress to pass federal legislation.
We can't hold this tied back forever.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott says he'll have them arrested and brought to the Texas Capitol when they return to the state. Laura Podesta, CBS News.
Any federal legislation needs to go through the Senate, which is equally divided. Democrats will likely need to abolish the filibuster if they want to pass a Voting Rights Act. Senate Democrats believe they have a deal on a $3.5 trillion budget package. That's in addition to the existing $600 billion bipartisan effort that focuses on infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, and broadband. The Budget Committee announced late Tuesday evening that they have the necessary support for more of a human-focused infrastructure plan. The sweeping new Democratic proposal would expand Medicare benefits, adding vision and dental care, expand child care, and address climate change. Extreme heat and dry weather have combined for an explosive start to the western wildfire season. Dozens of fires are now burning from Alaska down to Arizona. The largest, the Bootleg Fire in Oregon, which grew to over 200,000 acres on Tuesday, an area roughly the size of New York City. That's a look at today's top national stories. Now let's check back in with Michael for our Something to Talk About.
Thank you, Zach. On the KOAM News Now Facebook page and our morning Insta poll, majority of Americans agree that when it comes to a budget, cash is king. According to a new poll, 51% of Americans say using cash helps them stick to the budget. Poll surveyed some 1,500 people, determined even Gen Zers like to use cash in order to stay frugal. Majority of the respondents from all age groups say they want to have about 52 bucks on them at all times. 77% agreeing when you don't have cash is a fear of theirs. Our question to you, what's your preferred method of payment? And right now, well, cash is still king according to this. 42% of you want the dollar bill. Oh, there we go. Thank you, on cue. That's the great thing about the Insta poll, though. We change it. Now we're at 39%. This is harder to do than election night, man. Election night's easier than this. All right, cash and card are going back and forth. I appreciate everybody taking part in it. 16% say check, and only 2% go with the modern mobile payment. You can make your voice heard, and we'll come back and catch up with this right before the end of the show and see how confused I get with all the changing numbers. But we got to do birthdays and anniversaries next.
We take this time to honor today's four-state hero. Kenneth Wofford served in the United States Air Force from 1941 to 1973. His hometown, Carthage, Missouri. We're proud to salute Kenneth Wofford, a four-state hero.
We'll kick the list off with Kyler Saporito. Nice looking cat shirt, Kyler. He is now a teenager and entering those years, those oh so important formidable years in Columbus. Sure. Happy birthday, my man.
And a happy birthday to Emily Craig, another big number birthday, important one anyway. 18 years old in Baxter Springs. Happy birthday, Emily.
Mike and Missy Cisney are celebrating their 21st anniversary. And Mike and Missy, I want you to know that these wishes come from all your family and friends as the Cisneys celebrate in Girard.
And a very happy birthday to Tommy Bennett, turning 81 years old in Joplin.
John Green, he's got a 72nd birthday. Happy birthday to John in Crestline.
And happy birthday to Irene Lowry, turning 58 in Chanute.
And we will finish it off with happy anniversary wishes going out to Jeff and Kim Crane. They are celebrating their 37th anniversary. Congratulations to the Cranes in Columbus. A happy birthday and happy anniversary to all on this July the 14th. That's where you can send them into. Birthdays at KOAMTV.com, or you can go to KOAMNewsNow.com and submit them there as well. Now, here's Zach Dodge with a very important birthday announcement.
You can, of course, be a part of the KOAM Birthday Club by going to our website, like Michael just mentioned, and signing up. You can get special deals from local businesses as well. So go to KOAMNewsNow.com and sign up for the KOAM Birthday Club today.
A sunny and warm beginning on this Wednesday morning. That's a live look outside of Television City, and there we are at 7th and Rangeline. Now we've got the sun put squarely above the old tree line there. We were at 70 degrees for most of the four states pre-sunrise. Now we're up to 75 in Joplin. The other things we'll concentrate on today will be the wind and also the humidity. 75 in Carthage, 73 in Neodesha, and 72 in Neosho. Wind tracker. All right, coming in from the south and steadily increasing throughout the course of the afternoon to the point where we'll go from about, sitting about 5 to 10 miles per hour right now. Then we'll go 10 to 15 later this morning. And then eventually we'll end up with 25-mile-an-hour gusts. Look at this comparison to where we were at this point in time on Tuesday. Everybody pretty much a double-digit jump up on the old Mercury. Skywatch Storm Tracker, we've had some cloud, it's been light cloud cover, but it's moved in from the north, and it's all part of this large thunderstorm system that really began out on the western edge of South Dakota and Nebraska, but now has not only expanded, but my goodness, this thing is throwing down 60-mile-an-hour winds, and that's where that cloud cover is coming from. Now, we don't have to worry about anything severe, and hopefully, because we stay on the dry side for today, we can finally let this expire. Got that pesky flood warning at the Taborville gauge that we've been putting up with for, I'd say, about a week now. As far as the thunderstorm risk map, that is where that system out of Iowa is going to head, kind of toward the Great Lakes right there. Just follow those jet stream arrows, and that means anything below that jet stream is just going to be abnormally warm today. As far as what we're looking at heat index wise, I'll say about 96, 97. Actual temperature sitting pretty close to 91. You know, usually that wind dies down after the sun goes down. Not going to be the case today. We're still going to have 20-mile-per-hour gusts here as we work from Wednesday night into Thursday. And when we get to Thursday, then we'll begin to turn our attention out to the northwest, because all this Gulf moisture that we're going to pick up today is eventually going to have to go somewhere. And so it will in the form of thunderstorm activity for Thursday night into Friday morning. And the 7-day forecast that'll keep us in the 90s on Thursday and then high 80s from Friday all the way to Sunday. We'll be back, wrap up this edition of the KOAM Morning News right after this.
Here's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door. President Biden is vowing to do whatever he can to protect voting rights. The president denounced the Republican-led efforts to enact restrictive state election laws as being un-American and an assault on democracy. Crawford County Health Department and Ascension Via Christi Hospital officials hold a press conference at Pitt State. Officials say the county is seeing its fourth major spike in COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began. The vast majority of those new cases, along with every recent death, are people who have not been vaccinated. Health officials reiterated that the vaccines are safe and recommended. Just under 50% of the county's population has received at least one dose of a vaccine. Area school officials consider how they'll respond to CDC guidance for students who return to school this fall. Last week's guidance from the CDC falls in line with their previous advice on masking for vaccinated adults. It says that fully vaccinated students and teachers do not need to wear masks in classrooms. The Jasper County Health Department says how COVID cases and vaccination rates look closer to the school year will dictate how schools operate. The health department says the best way to reduce the spread is by getting vaccinated. A number of Joplin area businesses say they're committed to creating a more diverse, welcoming, and inclusive community. The Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce and its Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Work Group formally announced the launch of their Joplin Leadership Pledge. Dozens of companies and groups have already signed the pledge. The EDI group says the goal is to ensure that companies and individuals create cultures that welcome and support everyone. That's a check of today's top headlines, the news you need to know before you head out the door.
One last check on our weather trend for today. High 80s, low 90s. I think we're all going to see 90s on the board here by the time it's said and done. Just remember, we got to factor in the humidity and also the south wind. You know, we only topped out at 87 degrees yesterday at Joplin Regional Airport. So, you know, average temperature this time of year would be 90, 91. Really just going to be right on par. It's been a while since we've had a string of 90s. Been kind of spoiled, honestly. Thursday afternoon, thunderstorms develop out to the northwest. They're going to carry us from Thursday night into Friday morning. Biggest threat's going to be pockets of heavy rain. Then after that, we can dispatch it and head into the weekend with scattered showers and still high 80s, though.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. And we'll, of course, be checking in with you again today at noon.
In Studio W.
In Studio W, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. But yeah, we'll check in with you to see what's coming up later on in the week with the rain.
And of course, you can stay here on KOAM. Got CBS Morning News coming up next.
Or you can switch on over with us on Fox 14, where your only local morning news continues.
Got anything in the hopper this morning that you want to make sure we get to?
Not really. Not that I can think of.
Great. That means more time for weather.
Right.
All right. I want everybody to get outside. Get outside earlier or wait till the evening. Zach and I were talking about that. Sometimes waiting until those peak heating hours are over would be the best time to get outside and get anything you need done. Just be safe out there. Have a wonderful day. Do me a favor. Like I said, be safe. And we'll do this all again tomorrow morning.
And thank you again for joining us for the KOAM Morning News.